Hi, I'm Zach Hodges, and in this video, we're going to talk again about getting the look of film on your photos. And we're going to focus this time especially on the texture and the grain of film. Now, I made another video talking about the color of film, and I'm assuming here that you've watched that one. But if you missed it, I'll link it in the description, and be sure to check that out. If you haven't seen it, maybe start there and then come back to this one. So once you do have the color looking the way that you like, it's time to add some grain. And I want to talk first about where grain comes from so that we can understand how to apply this effect. So with real film, the images are created with millions of these like microscopic little silver halide crystals suspended in gelatin, and when they are exposed to light and then chemically processed, the crystals that didn't really get any light are removed. And the remaining particles create the image that you see in the film. And those particles are also what creates the grain effect. And just like each film, will look a little bit different, each film will also have a slightly different look to its grain. So for instance, a black and white film will have black and white grain, but a color film, it has 3 layers of those crystals in it. And so it's going to have a little bit of color in its grain. And then also, higher sensitivity film, like a higher ISO, like a 800, 1600, 3200 even, those are going to have larger crystals because, that's how that's done. And that's going to create a coarser, stronger looking grain, while less sensitive films like ISO 50, 100, 160, those are going to have smaller crystals and therefore a finer grain, more subtle kind of looking grain. So a general rule of thumb, with real film at least, is that a brighter scene is probably going to have less grain, maybe finer grain, and a darker scene will have more grain, probably coarser grain. Now, as I said in the last video, I work at VSCO. I've been here working on film emulation for going on 13 years now, and I've had a hand in building the tools that we have in the app for grain and texture. And so I'm going to be using these today to show you how to get these effects, and we're just going to get right into it. So let's go into the Tools panel and let's open up the Grain tool. And we're going to start by turning up the strength control. And I'd actually suggest that you just crank this one all the way up. It's helpful just to start there, just to be able to see what the other controls are doing. But I also think it's a good practice just to see what it looks like. You may actually realize that you like it. I've seen so many people being like very, very careful, very particular about like the difference of, 1 decimal point or something, just not something that you're really even going to be able to see most of the time. And, in my experience, it's actually easier to pick a setting once you have seen kind of the range of the, what you're dealing with this tool. So I would encourage you, just ignore the numbers for a second and crank it up all the way. Just see what it looks like, and you may like it. Now, with the strength slider turned up all the way, we can really start to see the grain, but since it is such a detailed effect, it can also be helpful to pinch to zoom to get in a little closer here and see that detail. And now that we've done that, I want to talk about the other 2 controls. So we were just talking about ISO, and with a higher ISO film, you're going to have larger grain. So increasing the size will help you to simulate that if you're using a higher speed film like a KP8 or a KT32. Don't forget from the last video, the numbers in the name refer to the speed of the film, and so that can kind of help you as you're working here as well. Now, in the other video, we were also looking at AU5 and KE1. Those are lower speed films, right? And so they're going to have a lower ISO, they're going to have finer grain, and so we could reduce the size of the grain to simulate the look of those films. Now, moving on to the color slider, as I was just saying, it makes a lot of sense to leave this one at 0 if you're dealing with a black and white film. There's no color in black and white grain. But for color films, like, I have KC25 applied here, there will at least be a little bit of color in the grain because there's, grain in each of the color channels. So the color slider allows you to get some more realism with your grain texture for color images. And that's actually kind of a unique feature. And again, I would just encourage you, push this one up all the way just to see what it can do. Obviously that's too much probably, but now we can kind of back it into something that we like. And then now I'm going to come back to the strength slider and turn that down to about where I like it. And then I'm going to zoom back out just to kind of see the whole image here, and maybe even tap and hold to see a before and after and make sure I like what I've come up with. But that's looking really good. Now, we could stop here, but if you want, you can take this even farther and put some finishing touches on your film look with the effects section. So let's head over there. It's just right here in the middle. Now, the grain tool is generating texture based on the controls that you set, and that's really useful. But the effects section is working entirely differently. It contains scans of real film that you can overlay on top of your image, which can also look really great. Let's start off looking at, there's these categories. Let's look at the texture category to start off. And this one contains, dust effects, scratches, also, additional grain types. And you can get some really nice looking effects here. And then there's also another category for film frames. These will simulate the look of overscanned film. And there's options for all different kinds of film types, as well as color and black and white. So lots of great options here. Now, do be careful not to add a color film border. Like this one has color in it, right? So this is from a color film. Don't add this to a black and white image because that could never happen in real life. And vice versa, you probably wouldn't want to add a black and white border to a color film, just to kind of help with your realism. Moving on, let's look at the light section. There is, this category here called light leaks, and these are simulating, literally light kind of leaking onto the film from an old or a cheap camera, like the Holga camera is famous for this. And it often results in these kind of color clouds of orange and red appearing on your image. And, in here, these will go from kind of more subtle to more and more strong as you move from left to right. And those can look really nice. And then lastly, there is this distressed section. And this has some very strong effects that you can play with in here to really kind of amp up the film look. But don't forget that with all of these, you can turn down the strength of your effects. And even an extreme distressed look can still become really subtle as well. And all of these can be combined with the grain tool for, kind of layers of texture. So that can be pretty useful. And there you go. That is how to get the grain and the texture of film onto your photos. Now, I will have one more video with just some additional tips and tricks, we're not quite done, to take your film look even farther. So be sure to subscribe if you're interested in that, to be notified when that is released. And then also, I'm just curious to know in the comments, what do you do? How do you use these grain and effects tools? How do you set them? What are the looks that you're getting? I mean, I'm sure the things that I'm doing are interesting, but you probably have some tips and tricks that I've never even thought of. And then I'd also love to know, what else would you like to learn in this format? I'm going to be making more of these kind of videos, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. So that's all for now. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.